This is an introduction to the IRI Data Library. This presentation will last for about 45 minutes. Here are the objectives. First, to become familiar with the organization of the data library, learn how to find data sets and select spatial and temporal domains, see how to perform simple arithmetic analyses, see how to create customized maps and graphs, learn how to download data and images, and understand how the data library is related to the IRI map room. So first of all, the data library is a powerful data resource with a variety of capabilities. It's a data repository containing more than 400 climate-related data sets. Although some of these data sets are restricted, the vast majority of these are from public sources and are openly available to anyone who has an internet connection and a browser. It's also a data visualization tool. You can create time series, maps, cross-sections, and other graphs based upon data found in the data library. And you can also save these images in a variety of file formats. It's also a very powerful data analysis tool. You can do very simple things such as arithmetic operations, all the way up to more complicated analyses such as empirical orthogonal function analysis. It's also a data download resource. You can download data in a variety of formats. You can select only the data you want to retrieve and then download the data as plain text or binary in tables that can be easily exported into a spreadsheet such as Excel, or in a selection of GIS compatible formats. You can also download the results of any calculations or analyses that you perform in the data library as well in these same file formats. At the bottom of the page, you can find the URL for the data library homepage. So we'll start there and take a look at the data library homepage. At the top, you will see a short description of the data library and its capabilities. Over on the right side, you will see a link to the IRI map room, and this contains a variety of maps and analyses based upon data primarily found in the data library. Many of these maps and analyses are strictly climate related, but many of these are maps, analyses, and tools that have been created in collaboration with the IRI's partners in fields such as health, food security, and disaster work. In the middle of the page, you will find the What's New section. This is where we list new data sets that have been added recently or new capabilities. Near the bottom, you'll find a Help Resources section, and this includes links to an introductory tutorial, a statistical analysis tutorial, function documentation, and frequently asked questions and answers. There's also a Finding Data section. Since there are so many data sets in the data library, it can be daunting at first to find exactly the data that you're looking for. So there are a variety of resources listed here to help you find the data that you need. So we'll first talk about how to find data sets in the data library. And a good place to start is with how data sets are organized in the data library. And they're organized as a hierarchy. And at the top of the hierarchy are the institutions or the individuals that have provided the data found in the data library. And so in this example here, NASA would be one of these organizations. Now below that level are data sets and sub-data sets until you get down to the level of individual variables. And so these data sets and sub-data sets would include things such as particular experiments, or data centers, or projects, or possibly authors associated with the data set, or particular versions of data sets, or maybe the instruments used to take the observations. And you work your way down until you get to the level of individual variables such as precipitation or temperature. So returning to the Data Library homepage again, if we go to the Finding Data section and click on the Datasets by Source link, you'll be brought to this page, which is the Sources page. And this is the top of the hierarchy. So here you see listed the organizations and individuals who have provided data found in the data library. If you scroll down the page a little bit, you'll find a link to NASA. And so if you click on that link, you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. And here you see the first level of data sets under NASA. So what are listed here are the experiments or data centers or projects, etc., that we saw illustrated in the schematic a couple of slides ago. So now if we return to the Data Library homepage again, and again go down to the Finding Data section, you'll find a link that says Browse Search Datasets. If you click on that link, you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. So this is a faceted search of datasets within the data library. The datasets have been tagged with terms that describe the data they contain. And these terms are organized into categories such as quantity or variable, analysis, person, sector, institution, etc. And the search interface lists these categories and their individual search terms on the left side. So clicking on a search term will provide a list of datasets on the right that have been described by that term. And once a keyword has been selected, the terms that remain in the list on the left side of the page will be keywords that describe datasets found in the search. And selecting additional terms will further narrow the list of datasets to only those that are described by the terms that have been selected. So this is a good way to find datasets based upon certain data requirements that you might have in mind. Back to the Data Library homepage again. In the Finding Data section again, you'll find a link that says Datasets by Category. If you click on that link, you'll be brought to this page. So here we have organized sort of by hand datasets into certain categories that help to describe the data. So these categories include such terms as air-sea interface. This would include datasets such as sea surface temperature datasets. Or atmosphere, which would contain atmospheric pressure or temperature or precipitation. And so here is the full list of the categories listed on this page. So for example, if we click on the atmosphere link, you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. And here the individual datasets that have been grouped within this category are listed in a table with short descriptions and other information. So in the leftmost column you see the dataset name and the link that will take you to the page for that dataset. The other columns show the spatial resolution if it's a gridded dataset. So for example, it will show, if it's a 2.5 degree by 2.5 degree latitude longitude dataset, that will be listed here. If it's a station dataset, it will list the number of stations in the dataset. This also includes a column for the spatial extent of the data. Is it a global dataset or a more regional dataset? You'll find information about the time period covered by the data, and you'll also find information about the temporal resolution. Are the data daily or monthly or seasonal? And then below that you'll find a short description of the dataset. So if we scroll down the page a little bit, you'll find a link to a NASA dataset. And if you take a look, you'll see that it's a 1 degree by 1 degree latitude longitude gridded dataset. It covers the globe. It covers the time period the 1st of October 1996 to the 31st of December 2005. And it contains daily data. And in the description you see that's a 1 degree daily combination precipitation estimates. So if you were to click on that link, it would take you to that dataset page. So let's talk about what a gridded dataset page looks like in the data library. So if you were to click on that link, you would be brought to this page. And so there are several features to note. First of all, at the top is the function bar, and this provides access to data manipulation, visualization, and download tools. Below that is the source bar. This provides navigational information. It shows you exactly where you are in the data hierarchy. It also provides an access point to data documentation. You'll see an asterisk. There are other links to dataset documentation as well. In the blue menu bar on the left side of the page, you'll find a link there. And in the Documents section, you'll find a link that says Dataset Documentation. Further down on the page is the Datasets and Variables section. This provides access to variables or lower level datasets. And at the bottom of the page, you'll find the Grids or Independent Variables section. So this provides information about the grids upon which the data depend. For example, latitude or longitude or time, or possibly height or depth or ensemble member if it's a forecast data set. In this case, this precipitation data set depends upon time, longitude, and latitude. Time is called T, and it covers the period the 1st of October 1996 to the 31st of December 2005. And so there are 3,379 time points. Longitude is called X, and it covers the entire globe. And latitude is called Y, and it extends from the North Pole to the South Pole by 1 degree. And so if you were to click on the precipitation link on this page, you'll come to a new page that looks a little bit different from the previous one. So first of all, if you look in the source bar, you'll see that the precipitation variable has been added to the end of it. And we're now at the bottom of the hierarchy. You'll also see that the Datasets and Variables heading is gone, but there is some additional information about this particular variable that's been selected in the Other Info section of the page. So if you scroll down the page a little bit, you'll see some additional information such as what the missing value indicator is, or possibly what the units are. So in this example, the units are millimeters per day. So if we go back to the top of the page and take a closer look at the function bar, you'll see that there are some icons that give you access to what's called the data viewer. These icons give you an idea of what kind of visualization you can make within the data viewer. You'll see several options for making maps, such as contour maps or color maps. And you'll often see an option as well for creating time series. And the options that appear here depend upon how many dimensions are available in the data sets, how many grids there are. So we could click on one of these icons, and in this case this would be the icon that would produce a color map with continents outlined. If you click on that link, you'll be brought to the figure viewer, and in this case it looks something like this. And we'll come back to this later and go through it in more detail. Also in this top section you'll see a link called Data Selection. And if you click on that, it will bring you to a page where you can specify exactly the data you want to visualize or download. And we'll come back to this later as well. You'll also find a filters link. This provides access to common data manipulation tools. If you click on that, you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. And what you have here are links where you can just click once and immediately perform a calculation on the data. So this is just a small subset of the calculations that you can perform within the data library. So for example, if you had a monthly data set, you could, with a click, calculate a monthly climatology or anomalies. You could average over an independent variable such as x, y, or t. You could calculate the root mean square, or you could find minimum and maximum values. Back on the main dataset page, you'll find a data files link at the top, and this provides access to data downloads. If you click on that link, you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. At the top, you'll see an estimate of the amount of data in the file that you would download, although the exact size of the file will depend upon the file format you choose, how efficient it is, and how much metadata is also included within the file. And then below that you'll find several sections, and we'll talk about those in more detail later. Also at the top of the page you'll find a tables link, and this provides access to tabular data that you can download into Excel, for example. If you click on that link, you'll see a page that looks like this. There are three sections. There's the rectangular array of data section, a 2D tab separated table section, and a columnar table section. And we'll come back to this later and look at it in more detail as well. Then back on the main dataset page again, you'll find a link to expert mode. And this is where you can enter your own commands in Ingrid, which is the name of the programming language used in the data library. If you click on the expert mode link, the page will change just a little bit, and the main difference that you'll see is that a text box has now appeared at the top of the dataset page. And this is where you would enter your own commands. So below the information that's already there, you would enter, say, a command to select data or perform some sort of calculation, and then you could click the OK button to actually apply those commands that you've entered. So right now what you see in the text box is an indication that you're in expert mode, and then the name of the data set and what level you're at in the hierarchy, which mirrors the same information found in the source bar. Okay, so that was what a dataset page for a gridded dataset looks like. Let's now look at what a dataset page for a station dataset looks like. So there are really three key differences. In a station dataset, on the front you'll see a map that displays the locations of all the stations within the dataset. In the grid section of the page, you'll see station identifiers in the grid information. And then the third thing is that you'll find some extra variables that provide station information. In other words, this is metadata about the stations, such as elevation, latitude, longitude, and the station name. So just a word of caution, if you take a look at the grid section, you'll see that the time grid runs from January of 1697 to May of 2006. So the time grid information shown here represents the full extent of the data set. This does not mean that all of the stations in the data set have data over this full time period, just that at least one station has data that start in 1697. Okay, so now let's talk about selecting a data domain in a gridded data set. So let's return to our NASA precipitation data set that we saw before. And let's click on the data selection link at the top of the page. And so that will bring you to this page that we've seen before. And let's go through the steps for selecting the data that you want from this data set. So there are 3 steps. First of all, you go down to the setting ranges section of the page and change the text in the setting ranges boxes and use the same syntax as the text that's already there. The second step is to click the Restrict Ranges button, and when you do that, this page will refresh. And the third step is to check the information in the gray box near the top of the page that shows information about the grids. And check there to make sure that it's selected the ranges along those grids that you really want. And if it does appear to have chosen the ranges that you want, then click the Stop Selecting button, and that will select the data that you want and return you to the main dataset page. So let's go through an example. So if we go down to the Setting Ranges section, say we want to select the time range, the 1st of October 1996 to the 31st of January 1997. So that's what you would type in. 1, then OCT with a capital O. So you would use the 3-letter English abbreviations of the month names, capitalizing the first letter in the abbreviation. And then 1996 space TO space 31st January 1997. And we also want to choose the latitude range from 60 south to 60 north. So if you click on the Restrict Ranges button and then click the Stop Selecting button, it will return you to the main dataset page with your selections intact. And you can tell that by looking at the source bar, and you'll see that the selections that you've made will appear there. And if you look at the independent variables or grid section, you'll also find that the selections that you've made will be represented there as well. Okay, so now let's talk about selecting a data domain in a station data set. So there's one really key difference. In a station data set, instead of selecting a spatial domain, you're really selecting stations. And there are a couple of options for doing this, for making station selections. The first option is to select all of the stations in a particular area. So there are several steps, and the first step is to click and drag a box over an area of interest on the map, or manually enter latitude and longitude limits in the text boxes at the edges of the map, and then click the circular arrow or redraw button. And when you do that, it will zoom in on the region that you're interested in. The second step is that when you're satisfied with the area that you've selected, click the List of Stations in Current View link below the map. That will take you to a new page that lists all the stations in the area you've selected. And on this page, if you want to select all of those stations, click the link that says Dataset and Map with all data found in search. Okay, so let's do an example. Let's say we want to select stations in the southern tip of Africa. So we can either change the latitude, longitude ranges in the text boxes at the edges of the map and click the redraw button, or you can click and drag a box, such as the rectangular green box shown on this map, and choose an area over Southern Africa. When you do that, the map will automatically zoom in on the area you've selected. And if you're happy with that area, then you can click on this list of stations in current view link at the bottom of the page. And that will bring you to this page. So this page lists all the stations within the area that you've selected. And if you're happy with that and you want to select all of those stations, you can click this dataset and map with all data found in search link. When you do so, it will return you to the main dataset page. And if you look at the map, you'll see that the only stations now shown on the map are those in Southern Africa that you selected. If you look at the source bar, you'll also see information that indicates that you've made a selection of stations. And if you look at the grids section of the page, you'll see a list or information about the ID numbers of the stations that you've selected. In this case, we've selected 195 stations in Southern Africa. Now, another option for selecting stations is to search for one particular station. And the set of steps is a little bit different. So the first step would be to click on the searches link to the right of the map on the page. That will bring you to the page that gives you the list of stations available. In this case, if you start with the searches link, it will list all of the stations available in the dataset. The second step is, on that page, enter a location of interest, such as the name of a town or station, and then click on the search button. And then the third step is to select all of the matched stations in the search. Click the dataset and map with all data found in search link to select all of them, or to select one or more of the matched stations in the search. Select the appropriate checkboxes next to the station IDs on that page and click the Get Marked Stations button. So let's do an example. So if you click on the searches link, it will initially bring you to a page that lists all of the stations in the dataset. But at the top you'll see that there's a search interface and you can type in a name of a location. So in this case we want to look for stations in Windhoek, Namibia, in Southern Africa. So we can type in the Windhoek name in the name text box and then click the search button. And when you do so, it will show this page. And in this case, the search returned 3 stations that matched the Windhoek search. Now the options here are to either click the dataset and map with all data found in search link to select all 3 stations, or if you want to select just one or more of the stations, you can click the checkboxes next to the station IDs of the stations you want, and then click the Get Marked Stations button. Or if you just want one of these stations, you can just click on the station ID number for that station. So when you make one of those choices, in this case we've decided to choose all 3, you'll be returned to the main dataset page again with your selection intact. And so you will see in the source bar the station numbers of the stations that you've selected. If you look on the map, if you look very carefully in Namibia, you'll see the 3 stations that have been selected. And then if you scroll down the page and look in the grid section, you'll see the ID numbers of the 3 stations that have been selected. Okay, so now let's talk about visualizing data, making maps and graphs. So we'll return to the NASA precipitation data set that we were working with before. And in this case, let's click on this icon, the colors with coast icon, to enter the figure viewer. And when you do so, the figure viewer will look something like this. And let's first talk about the three buttons on the left side of the page. The top one, the circular arrow button, is the redraw button. And so if you make changes, say, to the time information or the latitude, longitude text boxes, to apply those changes that you've made, you would click the redraw button. If you've previously zoomed in on the map, but you've decided you want to not do that and return to the full view available of the map, you can click on the Zoom to Full button. And finally, the Help button will display this same page, the figure viewer page, but will provide some additional text that helps to explain some of the features on the page. Just above the map, you'll find a control for the time in the data set. So this is where you would select the time of the data in the view. In this example, we're looking at data from the 1st of October 1996. You can change the date or time by typing in a new date and then clicking the redraw button, or you can step forward or backward in time by one step by clicking on the button to the right of the text box. You can also make animations, and the way to do that is to enter a range of dates. So the syntax for that is to enter the first date, then a space and the word to, and then a space and the last date in the range, and then click the redraw button. You can change the region in the map view by changing the latitude and longitude values in the text boxes at the edges of the map and then clicking the redraw button. Or you can click and drag directly on the map to zoom in on a particular region. You can also change the limits of the color scale of the map. So for example, if you need to examine a certain range of values, of precipitation values in this case, in a little more detail, then you can change the limits of the color scale and click the redraw button to apply that to the map. There are some other options for changing the map as well. There are several pull-down menus below the map. The first two change what's shown on the X and Y axes. For example, you could flip the longitude and latitude axes and put latitude along the x-axis and longitude along the vertical axis. There's also a drop-down menu for controlling the overlays shown on the map. So for instance, you could add countries and provinces. And there's also a pull-down menu, the one on the far right, that controls what kind of map is shown. Is it a color map? You could also show a contour map. There's also an option for showing a map with colors and contours. And there's also an Edit Plot button that allows you to add some more customizations to the map. So if you click on that link, you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. So if you look at the columns towards the bottom of the page, in the left column there's a drop-down menu that allows you to choose from among some pre-made color scales. So you can choose a different color scale and apply it to the map. There are many pre-made color scales made specifically for precipitation or temperature maps or for correlation maps. And on the right side of the page there are options for choosing overlays to apply to the map. For example, you can choose to overlay countries or provinces or districts, or even rivers and streams. Now, to apply the choices that you've made on this page, you can click on the More Options button, and that will return you to the figure viewer page with the options that you've selected. Now, back on the figure viewer page, if you look towards the bottom, you will see some options for downloading the map image in a variety of formats. You can download the image as PostScript, encapsulated PostScript, PDF, JPEG, GIF, or PNG. If you create an animation, you can save it as an animated GIF image by clicking the GIF option. If you make an animation and choose the PDF option, it will create a PDF document in which each individual page shows each individual step, or a map from each individual step in the animation. Also note that there are two rows in this area. The top row is the option for downloading the figure of the map itself. The bottom row is the option for downloading the image of the color scale that goes with the map. You can also use the figure viewer to select data as well. So if you zoom in on a particular region of the map and choose a particular time or a range of times by choosing to make an animation, then you can choose that data and return to the main dataset page by clicking the Data and View button on this page. However, if you want to return to the main dataset page without selecting the data that are currently in view, you can click the entire dataset link, or go to the top of the page and click the dataset link at the top of the page there in blue. Okay, let's now talk about downloading data files. So back on the main dataset page, there are really two steps involved in downloading a data file. The first step is to select the data files link at the top of the page. And that will bring you to the data download page, and on that page you would then select the link for the format that you wish to use. So if you click on the data files link, it will bring you to this page, which we've seen before. Again, at the top of the page you'll see an estimate of the amount of data in the file that you choose. But again, the actual size of the data file will depend upon which type of file you choose to download and how efficient it is at holding the data, and how much data or how much metadata it contains. The first section at the top of the page, labeled Download Data to Specific Software, lists a few options, some links that allow you to download data easily into particular types of software. So for example, there's a link for downloading data into GRADS. There's also a link for downloading data into MATLAB. And below that are other available file formats. There are a couple of options under the full information formats, such as netcdf. And this will produce a data file that contains the data and the metadata that describe the data. Below that, you will see sections that say partial information formats, and so these files contain data and then labels for the data, such as a table, or a columnar table, or a two-dimensional table. And so the data columns would be labeled with, say, longitude coordinates, and the rows of the data table would be labeled with latitude coordinates, for instance. There are also some GIS compatible formats available, including a two-dimensional ASCII file with an ArcInfo header, URDAS-LAN format, and GeoTIFF images are also available. And then the final section is a group of data-only formats. So these are file formats that just contain pure data without any additional metadata. So these would be a variety of binary file formats and a variety of text formats. You can also download tables, and there are a couple of steps for doing that. The first is to select the tables link at the top of the page, and that will bring you to a new page, and on that page you would select the link for the desired table format. So if we click on the tables link, it brings you to this page, and as we saw before, there are three sections on this page. There's the rectangular array of data section, and this section produces a table in which the table appears just as HTML within the browser. And you'll see that there are a couple of options available here in this case. There's the YX table and the XY table. And the difference between these is simply the orientation of the table. So in the case of the XY table, you'll see that the columns of the table are labeled as longitude and the rows are labeled as latitude. And the YX table is just flipped the other way. The 2D tab separated table section allows you to download a table as a 2D tab separated table. So instead of showing the table as HTML in the browser, you will be prompted to download the table, which can be easily exported into a spreadsheet such as Excel. And the options available here are the same as those in the rectangular array of data section. And finally, you'll see a section for columnar tables, and you can choose to download the data just in these vertical columns. So for instance, if you click on the columnar tables with options link, you'll be brought to a page that looks like this. At the top, you'll see that the first column will contain all the longitude labels, the second column, Y, will contain all the latitude labels, and then the third column contains the actual data values. So this is a somewhat less efficient format, but it can be useful in some cases. If you look further down on the page, you'll see that there's a drop-down menu under File Type, and this allows you to choose whether to view the table within the browser as HTML, or to download the table as tab-separated or comma-separated values, for instance. And those are handy if you want to export the data into a spreadsheet such as Excel. Okay, so this page shows a screenshot of the table of contents of the statistical analysis tutorial. And this is just to give an idea of the kinds of analyses that you can do within the data library. So this tutorial provides step-by-step instructions on how to do these kinds of calculations and provides live examples within the data library. So it provides examples for calculating measures of central tendency, such as the mean or the median, for example, for calculating running and weighted averages, measures of dispersion, how to do correlations, how to do singular value decomposition. So this can be a handy resource to help you get started. This is what the front page of the IRI map room looks like. And again, these map rooms, or these sections, contain analyses and maps derived mainly from data sets within the data library. You'll see that there are 7 sections. The first 3 sections, global, regional, and ENSO, are all climate-related map rooms, and contain pre-made maps and analyses of climate data. The other four, the health, food security, fire, and International Federation map rooms, were developed in collaboration with IRI's partners and provide information about these various sectors. If we take a closer look and click on the International Federation map room, you'll be brought to a page that looks something like this. And a goal of many of the maps in the map room is to place climate information into some context that's relevant to the user. And this map room tool is one example. The goal of this tool is to place 1 day to 6 day precipitation forecasts for the globe into context with respect to historical observations, and to help answer whether the precipitation forecast is calling for unusual or extreme rainfall amounts. And the primary purpose of these maps is to identify areas with the potential for rainfall that may produce flooding. The tool has options for displaying short-term forecast information as anomalies from normal, or percentiles, or percentage of monthly total precipitation. And other options display the IRI probabilistic seasonal precipitation forecasts and other information such as maps of population and poverty to help provide information about the vulnerability of populations. So finally, once you're working on your own within the data library, here are a couple of tips. First of all, when you do anything in the data library, such as select data or perform a calculation, you are creating a unique URL in your browser. And so it's a good idea, if you want to go back to analyses that you've been creating, to bookmark that analysis, and that will take you right back to where you were. And if you do have a question, the first thing to do is to look for similar examples in the tutorials and in the documentation resources. But if you can't find the information there, then you can send an email to help@iri.columbia.edu, and that will send an email to me, and I'll do my best to help you. And it's a good idea to copy the URL of the page that you're having trouble with into your email. That will give us a good starting point to help you with your question. Okay, so this ends this presentation on the introduction to the data library. Thank you very much for listening.